All right. Well, I wanted to thank everyone for attending today at the latest work group for our efforts at the Building Codes Division to implement the requirements of HB 2415 from the 2021 legislative session. My name is Tyler Glaze. I'm a policy analyst for the division, and I am joined by Selena Patterson, who is the e-permitting manager for the Building Codes Division. And we are just going to get started here with a little bit of background. But at first, if I could go around to the participants and have you introduce yourself, that would be much appreciated. So, Doug Morgan.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Doug Morgan. I'm with the City of Portland Development Services.
Thank you for attending. And Graham Roney.
Good afternoon. My name is Graham Roney. I'm the licensing manager with Building Codes.
Excellent. And we have Chris Carpenter as well.
Hey everybody, Chris Carpenter. I work with the Sheet Metal Mechanical Contractors Association as well as the Plumbing and Mechanical Contractors Association.
Excellent. And Brady H.
I'm here just as an observer today.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for attending. We also have Terry Watson, who's a policy analyst here with the division, as well as the assistants of Melissa Stiles and Laura Burns. So just to kind of go over some background very briefly, HB 2415 recently passed the Oregon legislature and was signed into law by the governor. The bill took effect on September 25th of 2021, but portions of the bill are not operative until January 1st, 2025. And this bill will create minimum standards and more statewide consistency for electronic processes for reviewing plans, issuing permits, and performing field inspections. In addition, by the year 2025, all municipalities that administer and enforce a building inspection program will be required to use the division's electronic system or an equivalent system for certain information and services. This system will include, but need not be limited to, the following: licensing, permitting, inspections, and other relevant information, access to forms, electronic submission of and payment for permit applications, electronic submission of plans for review, electronic receipt of plan approvals and permits, electronic issuance of minor label and other appropriate permits, access to permit and inspection processes, receiving requests for and scheduling inspections, tracking of corrections and granting of approvals, performance of electronic field inspections, construction progress inspections, and on-site verification of the compliance with the building code requirements, and the coordination and tracking of construction-related services. At the January 25th, 2022 Rules Advisory Committee meeting, the division discussed the results of a survey of jurisdictions regarding their electronic process capabilities and obstacles. Now the division would like feedback on how to conduct a survey of contractors regarding electronic permitting, plan review, and inspections. So for purposes of discussion, the division is interested in to learn what electronic systems design professionals and building contractors are currently using and any limitations to assist in its creation of statewide consistency and the required statewide system for jurisdictions. The division has prepared a draft survey to be completed by contractors and members of the building trades industry. This draft survey is enclosed with these materials, and we're very interested in feedback from the work group regarding this survey. So we did a similar work group related to this of design professionals last week, and we will kind of go in a similar format to that work group, by which we will go through sort of the questions one by one, see what feedback the group has, what suggestions they might have for additional questions or clarification of those questions or clarification of language to make things a little bit clearer, and just kind of go from there and see what we can gather from this group. So first off, our first question was, are you a contractor? And if so, what kind of contractor, trade versus general? Do we have any feedback from the group on whether or not there needs to be any additional clarification for that, or is that pretty straightforward and kind of basic opener?
Tyler, can we have somebody share the screen just so it's nice to be able to see the see the words up in front of you? So I think we, I know not everybody here was in the Friday afternoon meeting, but in the course of that meeting, discussing a survey for design professionals, it was suggested that we kind of gather a bunch of upfront information, which we have a start at here as what type of contract, are you a contractor, what kind of contractor, trade versus general. But in some of the suggestions, on Friday, we're also like, what region of the state do you primarily work in? Any other thoughts of, what we should be ascertaining about contractors just to get a better sense of reference in terms of their answers?
Doug, go ahead.
Yeah, it's a good start. Like, what area do you do most of your work in? Also wondering if you want to think about residential versus commercial. Needs of residential versus a commercial contractor might be somewhat different. I'm not sure. And then I don't know if you want to be so specific to get down to the particular trades that they work in or serve. That's all I can think of.
I think that might be good just to ask specific, when we ask that question, are you a general, we can just specify or have a drop down maybe of what trades, region of the state, residential versus commercial. Any other thoughts on things that we might gather in terms of background information of who's being surveyed?
Would you want any information about, the size of the company? Are they a sole proprietor? Are they, a very large company that's got lots of resources? Not sure how to approach that. I'm throwing a lot out there. You can pick and choose how much of this you want to include. If a survey gets too long, people won't wade through the whole thing, but just trying to come up with ideas.
I think that would be useful though, because there is a difference in terms of, in terms of electronic stuff, the staff resources that a company has affects, the ease of use and their experience with systems. So I think that might be, we may have to think about how to word craft that, but that I think makes sense. Any other thoughts? No? Okay. I think that is probably a pretty good selection of stuff. This is a little bit of overlap with the survey that we are working on Friday, but some contractors also submit their own documents versus having them done by the architect. And so we do have some questions here. So we kind of have what percentage of documents do you submit electronically? When you submit electronically, is it by email or by uploading to a website? So again, just getting a sense of what people are doing out there. I don't know, Doug, you were involved in the Friday meeting. We might want to just kind of track the questions that we asked in that one and pick out a few key ones and also ask them of the contractors perhaps. Any thoughts on things, things that might be different that if we're asking contractors about the electronic plan review process? We've got some more generic questions in here, like, asking for suggestions to improve the plan review, building plan review process, and asking if they've had any, I don't know if we want number 4, if you have, what communications issues have you experienced during electronic plan review? There might be another way to put that. I don't think we had that on the one for last week. Thoughts?
I think communication is pretty key. We talked a lot on Friday's meeting just about kind of the learning curve that's involved with all these different online systems. And, some of that goes right to communication. So I think asking this question or, a version of it, I think is worthwhile to hear that directly from the contractors where there's gaps or barriers here on communication.
Yeah, I agree. I think that could be a good one to hit on there.
Okay. All right. Again, we got some feedback in the Friday meeting about, and, had some different suggestions about how to word those things. And we'll try to maybe, mesh the two together. Okay. Well, we maybe any other thoughts about electronic plan review? Again, I think we got some good feedback on Friday, so we can try to kind of incorporate some of that into the questions that we asked the contractors also. But here, the permitting process was not something that we discussed last week. And so we're starting off here with what percentage of permits do you apply for online? What percentage of permit fees do you pay for online? What do we think about that? Should we expand that out any, or?
Just thinking that there's trade permits that don't require a plan review. And then there's trade permits that require a plan review. So more likely the ones that don't require a plan review might just be an electronic application, get your permit back. But if it requires a plan review, is that something that's different enough, and you want to know what percentage of those permits that require a plan review are being submitted online versus just a simple trade permit?
So we could do something like, what percentage of trade permits do you apply for online? What percentage of, permits requiring plan review do you apply for online? Something like that?
Right.
Okay. And then what percentage of permit fees do you pay for online? I think it might be, I don't know, what do people think in terms of like payment? It feels like it's important to ask people about the money side of things sometimes, but I'm not sure whether it's asking about what people are currently doing in terms of online payments, or asking about preferred method of payment. Like, I know some jurisdictions like large fees to be paid in checks, right? And other jurisdictions prefer things to be all paid with credit cards. And I don't know that we've heard from the contractor end of things what there's a preference for, or whether there's just a preference for consistency. And Chris, sorry, we didn't lean on you because you are our sole contractor representative here, but do you have any thoughts about that in terms of what might be useful, or from your experience, what might be good to ask about?
I mean, I'd have to talk to my contractors specifically. I did their government relations side of things, so they would have a lot. I think it probably really would depend on kind of what jurisdiction they're in, though. Geographically where they're at. Probably, I think, frankly, some of that might also come back a little bit to some of the communications questions from earlier in terms of how that relates. How often are they, working through some of those systems anyhow? But they would have the detail. I think it would vary, though, probably geographically. I think it's probably good to have them both in there, though, to kind of get as full a picture as possible. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that you would need to add for other specificity, but I think.
So maybe rather than asking what percentage of permit fees people are currently paying, maybe asking something more like, do you prefer to pay your fees online, or do you prefer to pay with check, or to, something like that, just to get a sense of, taking people's temperature about that issue.
Yeah, I mean, I do kind of, my knee jerk would be that kind of question 3 there would probably cover the question 2 as well, in that response. But it depends on how much you feel you would need that number, I guess.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, I would definitely ask about preferred payment methods. I think in our experience, people want options. Contractors like to pay by credit card, but there's credit limits. And if the fees are more than the limit, then you can't use your credit card. So for a while, we didn't have the option of, an electronic, direct payment, electronic check or whatever. And that was a request customers had made of us, and we have that option now, which is great. So definitely include that.
Okay. Alrighty, so we'll ask a little bit about payment methods. We do have questions about people's preference of, online permitting or in-person permitting and why. I think that's probably important to know if people, especially if people are saying they prefer in-person, it would be good to know why. What is it that they're missing from the electronic systems? And even if they do prefer online, maybe why is that preferable? So that, we can look at both ends of the process there, both the electronic and the in-person process. So, are there things that would improve the online permitting process? Any other things that you can think of that we should be asking about permitting?
I wonder if it's helpful to ask, kind of like we did with the electronic plan review, have you had any communication issues during the permitting process, maybe? Just to get a sense if there are pain points that maybe that didn't come through in those first few answers. I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Trying not to repeat all the same feedback I gave on Friday, but applicants want to be able to track their application. What is the status while it's under review? Do I have corrections and things are back in my court I need to tend to, or am I waiting for a review? So zeroing in on what aspects of those things are important to contractors would be good.
And I wonder if we might also want to ask a question somewhat related to the posting of permits on site. When you get to an electronic permitting system, the responsibility to then print out the permits and post them, like whether there are any issue with that related to electronic permitting. I mean, maybe that's a non-issue, but thoughts? Anybody seen issues with that, or?
I haven't heard anything specifically on that, but I'm not day to day in the inspection side of our operations, so I couldn't say for sure.
I also don't think it's not quite. So we have a bunch of stuff. We'll move on to inspections. I guess the other question might be if there are things, what about things like certificate of occupancy and temporary certificate of occupancies? Have those, as we move into an electronic world, are there any questions we should be asking about that? Or is that, you know what I mean? Are there, anybody heard any issues or can think of any potential things that change when you move to an electronic process?
I don't think so. I think we were issuing those electronically, even before we went full electronic plan review.
Okay.
So it's been so long since we implemented that aspect that I can't even remember if there were issues that came up. It seems like it's pretty seamless.
Yeah, I don't think I've heard of anything, but I figured I would check, any place where you're touching and making a change from paper to electronic potentially. I just wondered if there might be things. All right, so we'll add statuses, payments, kind of a general gauge. Actually, I guess one thing that we didn't, maybe, which actually goes back a little bit to the, maybe some of the upfront questions. Should we be asking folks like what kind of, unlike the design professionals where I imagine most of that is happening on computers, I would imagine with the contractors, they may be interfacing with electronic systems on smartphones, on tablets, on laptops. And it also might be useful to ask whether, the contractor themselves is doing it or whether it's primarily office staff that interacts with the systems. I don't know if there's some value in knowing that, but what do people think about that?
I could see that there potentially be some value around that. I know some of our contractors, the different staff, you're right. I mean, it could be tablets, it's whoever, where they are on the project. There is a little bit of that kind of mobility side of it, I think, too. So that could be helpful.
Okay, so maybe we'll ask some questions about what type of devices people use, and there might be a variety. Like you might be applying for the permit on your computer, but you might be tracking your inspections and your status on your phone, or something like that. So maybe we'll think about how to wordsmith that stuff also to get some feedback on that. Maybe along the lines of that, we may want to ask if people have had particular issues with mobile devices and electronic systems, because obviously that definitely can be an issue. Alrighty, any other things about the permitting process electronically? No, status, payments, devices. All right, well, let's talk about scheduling inspections. And again, here we're getting back to how do people prefer to schedule inspections, kind of the range of options that's out there, which ones do people prefer? And maybe we should also be asked which one do they like the least if they had some experience with it, so that, we kind of, these have all been out there for quite some time, and so maybe it'd be helpful to gauge what people are thinking about them. So we also have why is it your preferred method, but let's ask them about why don't you like some other things too, so we get some of that. Any other thoughts about inspection scheduling? Do we need to ask more detail about things like cancellations, rescheduling, any of that kind of?
Yeah, I can't come up with anything specific about canceling, rescheduling, but maybe just including more of an open-ended question about that. If there's, what features in a electronic scheduling system are important to you, or what barriers have you encountered? Something like that could surface an issue that maybe we're just not aware of right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, or I think that's a good question. The other thing might be whether, so I know in e-permitting, when people schedule through the various methods, they have the ability to leave messages, whether there have been issues with the getting of those, whether the communication between them and the inspector is as effective in an electronic system as it is when you're leaving that voicemail. So.
That was kind of what I was going to say, was maybe something kind of along the communications line that we've asked in those previous sections, for that. Okay. Not necessarily that specifically, but yes, along that line.
Yeah, I think that's probably good. I don't know how about, so Doug, I don't know what the City of Portland does in terms of and whether we need to ask anything about this, but I know at e-permitting, we shut off the ability to schedule inspections, at 7 a.m. the day of. And I don't know if, I think that's pretty standard. So I don't know that there's anything to ask about that, but just throwing that out, is there anything, that people can think that we would be asking, or about same day inspections? I mean, I know in many, things come up and people sometimes try to request that. Is that something we should be asking about, or leave it alone?
Yeah, I mean, we do something similar with the cutoff time. And same day inspections, we will accommodate that if it's a critical inspection, or an issue with, somebody's heating or something like that in the middle of winter. So I'm not sure, something to ask about that. I know contractors, the schedule and inspection, they like to get some kind of information back about when the inspection might occur. Like, is it scheduled in? What time of the day do I have to hang out on my job site all day long? Or, we try to give like a 2-hour window, so at least folks have a rough idea of when the inspector will show up.
And Doug, do you all do that electronically, or is that something that, I mean, I know it's going to vary a lot. Like some of our counties, they have so much drive time that, giving those times, I think they often do, but it's often up to the individual inspector to reach out to his, to the contractors and say, here's what my day is looking like. In Portland, is that an automated response, or, again, how is that usually delivered to folks?
It's posted on our website. It's it's somewhat automated. There's a lot of work behind the scenes. The inspections come in, and then there's the cutoff time in the morning, and then the inspectors put together their routes for the day. And then once that's determined, then they can assign a time window, and then those time windows are then posted on the website. So that morning, contractor can check to see what their inspection window is. It's not a perfect system, but it's better than nothing for sure.
I mean, I think if we ask the question, do you want to know when your inspection is? The answer is going to be, of course we do. Yeah. So the question is, like, how do we get something that is more, I mean, we can ask that question. I'm wondering how maybe given that for local jurisdictions, the establishing of that schedule is often the morning of type of thing, right? So whether that's for you or whether that's for a county, which means the method of letting somebody know is probably going to vary, right? Some people are maybe not having the ability to post it on a website. Some people are going to want to reach out to contractors directly. So maybe something about the method of getting that information might be useful.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Just on residential inspections, we've got like 300 inspections a day. We can't call 300 people and let them know
right.
when their inspection's going to be. So we had to try to automate it some way. And so I don't know. I mean, it doesn't hurt to ask a question and understand their preferences on how they would like confirmation of the inspection and, a time window. I'm just not sure based on the answers how much we can do with that information, but.
Yeah, I mean, I also wonder, I mean, there are, it's not every inspection that the contractor actually has to be there for, right? And there are some where you probably want to be there for them more than others, right? And then there are also homeowners who are often the ones who are there actually for the inspection rather than the contractor. I don't know how we get at that. Yeah. Well, and all right, well, that's something to think of. Maybe we ask a more open-ended question about the communication, about the time frames. We can certainly ask. I'm sure most people would prefer to know that, but maybe we can think about how to get some info about that. I don't know. I'm drawing a blank on exactly how we would ask that question right now, but.
Yeah, me too.
Chris, any thoughts?
Not really. I hope that some of this gets captured a little bit in some of the open-ended ones, but hopefully at least some people will self-solicit some of this. But beyond that, not really right now.
One thing might be, I mean, I know, so on a permitting, most of our jurisdictions, that are actually individually, we don't actually have a method for people to post stuff. So most jurisdictions reach out, but when people request inspections, they often specify, some people really don't care, right? Like a homeowner is like, well, I'm just going to be there. It doesn't make a difference. And then some people are like, I would like to ask for X amount, for X time period. So there might be a question about maybe people having the ability to ask for particular time periods, or, I don't know. I'm reaching here. Anybody else have any thoughts?
I mean, we do that now as just an AM or PM, so do you want a
Right, we
morning
have that.
inspection, an afternoon inspection?
Yep.
But we always tell people it's not guaranteed.
Yep.
We'll do our best, but with so many inspections, we have to be efficient. So we definitely would not be able to, do a standard process where they could request anything more refined than like an AM or PM. That's challenging enough to accommodate that. But if something is really critical that it occur in the morning, my concrete showing up at 10 o'clock, I got to have this inspection, then that's where that ability to leave the message or the voicemail with the inspection request is really critical.
Yeah, and maybe so, and maybe we can ask some more open-ended questions, like kind of like, how difficult is it if you're not getting those, those time frames? I mean, that's in e-permitting. We have some jurisdictions do morning or afternoon. Some people don't specify. We also have a new app that's coming out that's going to allow the inspectors to kind of give heads up, like we're 30 minutes out, we're an hour out for the inspection, right? And so maybe something about what time frame, like, is it most useful to see that stuff in the morning, right? And know when something's happening. Would it be more useful to get regular updates? Again, no guarantees that every jurisdiction is going to be able to do this, but maybe just to kind of gather some information about how people would prefer. And as the technology changes, who knows what we're going to be able to communicate. So maybe ask something along those lines of, when would be the most helpful time to know, when the inspector's on the way, in the morning, etc. And also maybe what method, is it easiest to go check the website? Would you like to be able to get updates on your phone? Would you, etc. So maybe we can think of some questions along those lines, just to get a sense of what people would like, even if it's not necessarily all possible at this point in time. All right, then we had some questions. I'm moving on, unless people can think of other things about inspections, just the scheduling of inspections, the timing of inspections.
I'm wondering if maybe it would be useful for this survey, and frankly for any of these surveys that we're coming up with, to just kind of add an open-ended question in each section and say, is there anything else you would like to see improved in the area, or any area specifically where you're experiencing difficulty utilizing an electronic system, something like that. Just because I think the contractors or the design professionals, whoever it may be that's going to be answering the survey, I think they might have come up with something that either the work groups didn't think of, or the individuals that we're going to have take a run through these surveys before we actually send them out might not have thought of, and that they may not have remembered that by the time they get all the way to the catch-all at the bottom. They may, who knows, but I think it might be helpful as they're in the individual sections, reading the similar questions, and they may think of something similar that they want to say. That might be helpful.
Yeah.
Great idea.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
All right, well then let's move on to also inspection resulting and the receiving of inspection results. And so we have a question of, what's your preferred way to receive inspection results? Anything else that we can think of in terms of, questions about inspection results? Is there anything we should be asking separately about, say, re-inspections, or, what I mean? Like, or, the difference between an approved or a denied inspection, or the comments in terms of results, anything like that folks can think about or think of?
Well, maybe just to be specific, there's the result of the inspection, like it's approved or it's not approved. But then if it's not approved, what are the corrections that are required? Is that, sure, everybody's going to want that correction information included with whatever communication is delivered, and not have to go somewhere else to find that.
Yes.
But I don't know that every system does that, right?
I would hope so. That would be pretty crummy to get a denied result and then be like, well, yeah, why?
Yeah, right. And then you have to go somewhere else to find out why.
Yeah. But that is a good follow-up question, is like, when you receive, when you've received electronic inspection results, are you getting enough information, basically? Like, are those comments, are they specific enough? I don't know how, whether some people are writing out full comments, or people just using code citations, like what kind of things, maybe we can ask something about the level of detail, or whether they're getting enough information on those resulting things.
Yeah, I wonder if, again, not to sound like a broken record, but again, kind of a communication focused question, but around particularly, the incoming communication on that particular piece could be helpful if they have thoughts on that.
Or even also the timeliness of them. So even with, I'm assuming that electronic things are timely, but maybe they're not, you know what I mean? Or are they getting, like, do they actually, yeah, I guess we could ask if things are coming timely, or if they're even getting to the right people. I know that you can also have it like, where an electronic inspection result is sent. It can depend on a lot of different things, right? Sometimes systems are going to spit things to the applicant. Sometimes it's going to be up to the inspector to email those inspection results or to do that. And so maybe something about whether those things are getting to the right person, even, electronically. Alrighty. One thing that we didn't add in here, and I question whether we want to add this in there, is some questions about video and photo inspections, as to whether folks have had experience with them, and whether the contractors are interested in, or want to have those options.
I know we would be interested to see what contractors have to say about it. It is something that we've used on a pretty limited basis so far for reinspection of inspections. So not the initial inspection, but certain inspections, we do the video inspection on the corrections or the reinspection. We've been looking at ways to expand that and try to think about what kinds of initial inspections that might be suitable for. So the information would be useful to us, just to understand the contractors' preferences and what they'd like to see.
Yeah, and sorry, my earbuds got wonky for a second. Were you talking about that suggestions question 1 there on the electronic processes?
We are actually asking about video and photo inspections.
Oh, yeah, got it.
Yeah. And that's, yeah. Definitely want to ask. We're about to roll out our inspector app and our e-permitting app for the contractors. We're about to roll out live video inspections and photo upload in the same app. And, and I think the questions that you mentioned, Doug, are the questions that are going to need to be worked out. Like, what types of inspections are they appropriate for, or portions of inspections, like, what type of cover things, digging trenches, like all of that kind of stuff. What, rooftop inspection, when is it going to make sense to use which of those technologies? And so I definitely think we should ask some questions about it.
And I know that all of our contractor members are, obviously super interested in how that all starts to emerge and develop. I think a lot. I know that one thing, and I'm wondering, I think hitting those questions is going to be important. One thing that that they've even mentioned is things around like, how do we, what's the best way to do this? What's the most accurate way to do this? Is there a way to include licensing, numbers or certification pieces on who did the work and things like that is one thing that I know our folks, I think would be interesting to talk about too. I think that there's, probably a lot there, honestly.
Agreed. So maybe we ask, what, is there, are you interested, would you be interested in doing video inspections, or are you interested in photo inspections? What types of inspections do you think each of those would be appropriate for? It would be nice to know what the contractors think, as well as local jurisdictions think about, you know, what makes sense to do with those technologies, and what types of things do you think would be problematic? Also, just who's done them. I know during the pandemic, some jurisdictions were doing some limited stuff, mostly with FaceTime. So I'd be curious to see what people's experience was like with that. So
might also be helpful to get a sense of their individual capabilities, just kind of a swath of contractors, just to see if they're even set up for something like that, if they have the, you know, easily accessible equipment on site to, you know, jump on and do one of those electronic inspections if need be. I think that'd be helpful too.
Yeah, I think we could definitely ask that. I know that that can be a challenge, you know, if you're way down in the the basement, or even in the middle of, you know, Portland, or in a bigger, you know, place where there's usually good connectivity. Sometimes those locations are not so connected, right? And so that might be a good question to ask if people have had those issues. And certainly we did a pilot project in e-permitting like 5 years ago in Deschutes County. And at that point in time, the connectivity was just too iffy in too many parts of the county to make it work. But this time around, things seem to be better. I think that there's been a lot, you know, the connections and the amount of service that's out there is a lot better. And so we've been doing that same pilot in Deschutes County over the last couple of months, and we're not encountering those problems. So I'd be curious to see what people have to say. So. Okay, so definitely any other types of like technology stuff related to permits, inspections that we might have missed on this, or that issues that would affect contractors that I know one that we didn't ask about is the uploading of forms, you know, some of the required forms, and like the moisture content forms, the energy efficiency forms. I'm sure there are other things. I don't know how we ask about that. Doug, do you have any thoughts? Do you have any experience with that in Portland in terms of any pain points that you know of around stuff like that?
Not pain points that are different than just the standard plan review upload process. It's, I mean, we take in those forms electronically, like we do with the plans or calculations and that kind of thing. It's really the same process. So it's not any different.
Do you, but the timing sometimes is a little bit different, and I think that's affected sometimes the contractors and local jurisdiction, that often your plan review, all those documents are coming in at one time. It's logical. Sometimes some of these other forms happen at different points in the process, and it's either the jurisdiction's kind of trying to chase down the contractors to get stuff, or the contractors going, "Ooh, where do I get that form now?" And here we're at this process. I don't know if we've, again, any thoughts on that, or anything we should be asking about?
Yeah, that is a great point. Yeah, because those forms that need to be turned in as part of an inspection, or prior to a C of O, our inspectors are typically receiving those forms, or in some cases we have like dedicated email inboxes that are designated to send those forms to. So it would be worth asking a question about that. I'm not sure exactly how to formulate that, but ask about how do they prefer to submit electronic inspection forms, and any barriers that they've experienced.
Okay. Yeah, I think we can come up with something along those lines. Yeah, any forms that have to be submitted during the inspection process. Have you had issues finding the forms, submitting the forms, that kind of stuff, maybe. And what's your preferred way of doing that? Or okay, any other thoughts or any things that we might be missing? I'll look especially to you, Chris. Any thoughts of things that you know of that people have out there been thinking about in terms of electronic stuff on the contractor end of things that they're not seeing or would like to see? Or
I think you've hit it pretty well with some of these additions. I think that the communication and kind of the timeliness pieces, that'll probably be helpful information looking at some of these pieces. Again, I think that probably varies, a little bit depending on where they're at. But I don't know that I think that you've hit a lot of what I probably would have noted already. So
actually, you just said a word that maybe I think is helpful. You said timeliness. And so maybe we should ask a question of like, is there a particular point in the process where where you've noticed the biggest time lag, or where you're having the most, the most issues, or where that is slowing you down the most in the process, or something to that effect? I think timeliness is a good suggestion.
Yeah, sure. And then, potentially if there's any like bottlenecks or anything like that,
Yep. All right. Well, we may do well on time again this time too, which is not a bad thing. So we've got just a question. This I'm asking if there are suggestions, but the number 2 there, who should we be reaching out to in this survey? So in terms of the contractor groups and associations, I assume, we have a pretty good idea of those. Are there any other places we should be looking to reach out to?
Well, so I know that with our end, we work with a couple of the associations. I'm sure you've already got the other associations on there, with both the generals and the other kind of subcontractor levels. I just, not to overburden, the amount of, I don't know how much I'm going to get back and have to deal with and sift through. But I think as broad of a net as you can cast, you can just, look at who all is, who's registered, et cetera, as contractors. Just getting it out there. We will, on our end, be pushing it pretty hard as soon as this kind of goes out there, though, with our association heads just being like, hey, make sure all your affiliates get this and fill it out if they can. So.
Well, I know we can probably pull some lists of like permitting users, contractors. We also have the licensees. So, between CCB's mailing list and BCD's mailing list, and we could probably hit a huge range of contractors. It would be nice to get some folks who aren't already using electronic systems too, so that we get their feedback from them. So.
And that's where like the CCB list was kind of, I think, would probably be helpful. If it wasn't already something you're looking at.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Any other? I think that's probably a ton of people, and we just have to hope that we get. And I'm sure. And then if the associations can send out reminders to their membership to try to encourage people to send that out, and we also will need to try to keep this as brief as possible, so that people don't feel overwhelmed with it either, too. So. Yeah, absolutely. I'm hoping you'll get good feedback. I know there's a lot of excitement, I think, that we've heard from our folks just talking around this whole area generally, and as it it's continued to develop over time. So hopefully you get good feedback, and we'll keep pushing. Yeah, I think it would be great, for all of us to get this information. And so I think having the pieces, seeing both what local jurisdiction, we've got the survey of what they've got, what the design professionals, and then what the contractors are looking for, I think then that will give us a great picture of trying to figure out where to go, right? How to move forward, and what's going to serve folks the best. So. All righty. Well, any other thoughts?
Just one other potential question. In Friday's session, we talked a lot about what kind of resources or training do people need to navigate, a jurisdiction's online system. We've learned that there's definitely a learning curve there, and I think it'd be worth asking that question of contractors too. I think it's different. My experience has been it's different for them than it is for design professionals. Oftentimes for design professionals, it's that actual person doing the application upload, whereas contractors, it might be more of their office staff handling that kind of thing. So just understanding what's helpful for them in terms of like the training or resources to do those applications.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm glad you did note that. I think that the technical assistance side of it is always, an important one to hit. And if there's any gaps or, things like that, or if they're like, hey, that could be helpful. Yeah, that's fair.
Well, and that's, there's two parts of that. There's the upfront for the initial usage, and then, technical support. Also, like what is the most helpful technical type of support for individuals. So that's a good point too. Yep. All right, any other thoughts? Well, great. I think we've got a lot of good stuff. I think we'll get to working on drafts, of kind of a final draft of both the design professional and the contractor survey. We'll send both of them out to both work groups and just give everybody a chance to, put a set of eyes on them and give any last sets of suggestions before we actually send them out. Perfect. All righty. Well then, enjoy. We don't have quite as nice a day as the Friday afternoon, but we'll take the extra hour anyways, so I'm sure everybody can use it. Thanks so much.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Yeah.
Thanks for including us.
Yeah.
Take care.
Bye.